Okay, so I want to talk about an old secret. It's been around a long time. And you wouldn't know about it unless you had the mind to dig into the symbolism from ancient Egypt, from the Christian cathedrals and the symbolism that you find in there, from the ancient civilizations that had Buddhist statues, and unless you studied geometry and cosmic symbolism and numbers and everything else, all of this plays into this old secret. But today I wanted to talk about crucifixion, and also wanted to look at some Hebrew as well. These two images that you see right here, which are commonly referred to as crucifixion or Jesus dying on the cross, have significance in their symbolism. The two nails that you see in his hands are something that we're going to take a look at today, and the Hebrew meaning behind that. These two images are also an image of Da'ath. Da'ath means a heart that understands knowledge, and this was also something that was taught in the mysteries in ancient Egypt, called intelligence of the heart. You're seeing a picture of the tree of life on the left and on the right. The symbolism that you see contained in that cross and what you see him doing on the cross, it's very significant, and it's very Kabbalistic and Gnostic, and we find it in these cathedrals all over the places I've shown you in the geometry. So let's dig a little bit into this and see what we know. So these two images are people who are representing Da'ath, a person who has reached that point. And Da'ath means knowledge or gnosis. But when spelled out in Hebrew, each of the letters have a significant meaning to them. And it's not just simply knowledge by itself. It's a certain kind of knowledge. So these two images represent Da'ath. Geometrically, Da'ath represents the human body on the tree of life in this form as well. And if we take a look at the geometry like we were seeing there before, on this tree of life using the human skeleton, then we can see that the human skeleton and its geometry fits into this almost perfectly, even down to the bottom of the pelvis, the shape of the lines that surround the sacrum, and all the way up to the top of the pelvic bone. And then, of course, the lines that follow the spine, all the way up, arms contained inside of these vertical lines here. The shoulders following the same lines that we see here. The shoulders crisscrossing up and even to the neck area, coming to a point right at the base of the skull where the globe of the skull is. And then, of course, the triangle that surrounds the whole skull itself. This image that you see that is representing the human body is very interesting because it tells us a lot about not just the human body, but the numbers behind it tell us something too, which I won't go into in this particular video. But I wanted you to see what the human body looks like inside of this and understand that this is part of the imagery that you're seeing when you see Christ on the cross. It's another representation of this. This representation of the tree of life is more so kind of to show the geometry of the human body, while the other representation is kind of a larger one showing Christ reaching a point of Da'ath because he's moving up the tree of life. As you see right here, the tree of life is actually longer, but he's moving up with his feet on foundation and his head reaching a point of Da'ath. So let's take a look at the word Da'ath real quick in Hebrew and see what it actually means. So here is an image of the tree of life. Right here is Dath, and Dath is located right here where the throat is. If you notice where the sacrament is, his forehead here, this is the area of the, when you combine understanding and Chokmah. At this point is where you become a heart that understands knowledge, and in the system where we have chakras, this represents the Ajna chakra geometrically, as I've shown you before. So where is the heart located? Well, as we've seen with the Rosicrucian symbolism, the heart is located inside this inverted triangle right here. Right here at the top of this, where this line is right in between here of Chesed and Geburah, the top of the heart is located there. And what sits right at the top of the heart is called the thymus, which has been labeled before as the spiritual heart. But we don't want to go there. But what I want you to envision is this. We have Bina, we have Chokmah, which is wisdom, and we have the heart. So the heart is contained at the bottom of this triangle here. Now the heart's point is it's supposed to rise like smoke up this middle column and combine Bina and Chokmah, which becomes a heart that understands knowledge. This is something that is symbolic. It's not something necessarily supposed to be associated with the physical heart. But it's supposed to be something that's symbolic because of the geometry and its location. So we have the heart rising up the middle column here to combine wisdom and understanding. This was taught through symbolism a long time ago, and this is what we're learning. And so if we take a look at the Zohar here, if I read this to you, it says, and he explains his words, thus the smoke arises from Bina, which is in the heart, considered to be an understanding heart. It rises to Chokmah, which is like the brain. What is the smoke? It is the central column, Zer Anpin, that rises and unites Chokmah and Bina and becomes Da'at to them, the secret of a heart that understands knowledge. From the heart, Bina, Da'at rises, which is the central column that unites Chokmah and Bina. So, one way to understand the heart here, because it's also saying the heart is Bina, is to understand the Tetractys. If we take a look right here, we have on this tree of life 2 areas that it's referring to as the heart. One is referring to Bina, and one we know of, which is positioned right here in this inverted triangle. If we take a look at the symbolism of the Tetractys and the 72 names of God, then we can see by looking at the IHVH, okay, so Yod He Vav He, then if we take a look at the symbolism here, the Yod symbolism is representing the head, this area here, which is the He, representing the heart area. So if we think of creation happens from one point and expands out like a tree. So everything is actually all one, but because it emanates from one point. And that point emanates all the way down the tree, and until we get down to here, where we actually see all 4, nothing is in physical reality yet. It's all in the realm of the spiritual and thought. And another way to represent that geometrically is you can't see a point, you can't see a line, you can only see a plane if it's faced in one direction, and then when it becomes a tetrahedron, or when it becomes 4 points, at that point you have physical reality. Okay. So when you take a look at this right here, as we're moving back up towards the point of creation, the heart representing this thing right here that you see. Then if we take a look at the heart rising, the heart is associated to this area on the tree of life right here. But when we get to Chokmah and Bina, because Bina is like the heart and Chokmah is like the brain, you see that at the top 2 levels of the Tetractys. So the heart is actually rising up from this column here, the middle column, rising up to Bina to become an understanding heart, and uniting both Bina and Chokmah together to becoming a heart that understands knowledge. This is a reflection of Kether, which cannot be seen, but is the first point manifested in physical reality. When it moves down, and Bina representing the waters, Chokmah representing the breath, when they combine with each other, at that point we have Da'at, and that is when we see in physical reality something cosmic related to the nebula. Okay, I know so where there's a cosmic representation, there is a symbolic representation. There is a representation of the Hebrew letters themselves as pictographs and hieroglyphs. So all of these things combined, including number, including the way things are manifested from a point all the way down the tree, we can see now what makes sense when we read this thing right here, because in a version of the Tetractys we have the same thing. We have these three moving up to these two. So the heart is actually moving up to understanding. It's uniting them right here. And this is the area of Da'at. So this area is where the crown, you get crowned, and you're crowned with Kether. Da'at is like Kether, although Kether is in the unmanifest. It's the first point, but it can't be recognized until it's combined with these two, Bina and Chokmah. So in a way, Dath is similar to Kether in that sense. Let me read something to you from something from the Ladder of Lights by William G. Gray. This was done, I believe, in 1975. But he says here, Sephira Kether, the crown, the summit. Asiya, which is the physical world. World of expression, prima mobile, nebula. So now we can see here. And when we see this, it says the treetop at last. Here we are at the very apex of the middle pillar, where we can make no further progress on the tree of life unless we leave it altogether into the nothing above, or fall back to Malkuth and start all over again. Unless we have grown wings during our upward journey, can we only follow the latter course. Kether not only signifies a crown in the regal sense, but also the summit of any height, especially a mountain or a pillar. It has an amplified meaning of surrounding anything a friendly manner. A proverb says, the prudent put on knowledge, da'ath, as a crown. This gives a nice picture of the supernals together, with the crown of Kether ornamenting the prudent heads, Chokmah and Bina, that have reached a position of knowledge at Dath. So now, once again, let's take a look at Dath, knowledge. This area right here needs to move up to this area right here so that it can combine understanding and wisdom together. At that point, you get a crown, and that crown is the crown of Kether. Let's take a look at Dath itself and the letters, which are Daleth, Ayin, and Ta, and let's take a look at their meanings real quick. So here it is here. We have Daleth, we have Ayin, and we have Ta. It's from the Hebrew Strong's Concordance. And if we take a look at the first letter, Daleth, this actually has the meaning of gate or door in Hebrew. If we take a look at the Phoenician letter for that, it is a triangle. Then if we take a look at Ayin, Ayin has the meaning of eye. And if we combine those two together, the first two letters of the word Da'ath, we have an eye and a triangle. The last letter that we have in Da'ath is the symbol of Ta. Ta means the word truth. It also comes from the Egyptian hieroglyph, which means mark. If you take a look at the various pictographs for this, you have the X here. You have something that looks like the Christian cross. This is from the Egyptian hieroglyph. This is from, I guess, Roman times. This is what you see in the Phoenician. And then there's also one other version of that, and that is called the Tau. And the Tau is another version of this. As you can see, it comes from the ancient Egyptian form of the Tau, which means the mark. But look right here, what we have right down here. We have a crucifixion scene with a Tau cross. So now let's come back over and take a look at our other pictographs. So the other versions of those, we have the X, we have this here, we have the Tau, which looks like a large T. And let's take a look at some images. So the first image that we see here, this is St. Anthony, and this is inside of a cathedral. And he is on St. Anthony's cross. And look at that thing that they're putting on his head. What is that thing? That's a crown. And that means that this person has reached a point of da'ath. So what's the difference between him and Christ? Well, there's not really any difference in the symbolic representation here. They're both saying the same thing, but the X is the symbol of the mark that we're talking about. Another version of that that we've seen so far is this, and this is on the regular cross that we've seen. And now we've also seen a version of it with the tau, and here are some images of the tau inside of an old church that we can see. So in all of these cases, it represents crucifixion. But what of the eye and the triangle, which were the very first parts, which means the door to the eye? Well, let me take you back to the geometry here on this particular thing, and then I'm going to show you some symbolism that confirms this. So this is the tree of life right here, and this is Christ reaching a position of da'ath. Notice he has the crown. Just like St. Anthony was being given a crown and pointing upwards by an angel. But I want you to take a look at his head right here as it's tilted to the right. His head is actually surrounded by a triangle. This right here, which was done geometrically, and if you take a look at the geometry on his face, how it is symmetrical on both sides. His face fitting into the inverted triangle, but this larger triangle covering his head. So we have the cross, and then we have a triangle with an eye right here, and it basically is positioned at the point of da'ath. The eye and the triangle placed on top of the crucifixion at a point of da'ath, which is in between Hokmah and Bina. So, can we find this symbolism anywhere in Christianity? Well, as a matter of fact, we can. So if you notice right here, we have the eye and the triangle, which means da'ath, positioned right where we would expect it to be. Also, there are other images and paintings that we can see representing the same thing with Christ, with the eye and the triangle above him, and even that we see right here from an old, looks like a photograph of some kind of a Christian cross on wood with the eye and the triangle there. What I found funny was that somebody had said this was Luciferian, which is sad to see the ignorance that there is out there, but this is not for, the truth that we see here is not for everyone. Other people would break down and wouldn't know what to do if they saw this kind of information. The Hebrew that we see here is very, very old, and the meanings and the behind these pictographs, they go all the way back to ancient Egypt. So the symbol of Kether, as we see in the world of Asiya, as mentioned by the Ladder of Lights, is represented as the nebula. The Orion Nebula is what is depicted in these cathedrals that we see here. So in this picture we have an as above, so below. Right here he has reached the point of Doth, and it is also mentioning that the Orion Nebula that's positioned above him is kind of an as above, so below picture. Here, inside of Karlskirch Cathedral, we actually have the image of the Orion Nebula, and I've placed it kind of around this so that you can see the bow shock. The images that they're using on the left and on the right are found inside of this, which is also located in the church, on both of these churches, in the same area geometrically as where you find the Ajna chakra, or a position of Da'ath. The last thing I wanted to show you really quickly is I took these particular meanings from the Hebrew letters from the Kabbalah Unveiled, which is done in 1912. But this isn't the only place you'll find these meanings. Their meanings are found throughout history all over the place, meaning literally the same things as far as these Hebrew letters go. And this is why a lot of times when you take a look in the Bible and they name something odd, but when you take a look at the Hebrew letters and you take the name and you separate it into the actual letters themselves and then analyze it, all of a sudden it has meaning. This is done all over the Bible. And so what I wanted to show you was the last part here. The meanings of these right here. Daleth meaning door. Ayin meaning eye, which we've already looked at. So I want to take a look at the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So when we take a look at the actual meanings of each one of these letters in Hebrew, we find something really interesting about it. The word Yod, or excuse me, the letter Yod, is number 10, and that means hand. The Hey right here means window, but it also means look or behold. And the pictograph of this is actually a man standing with his arms raised. This is actually taken from Wikipedia, which is also very similar to the symbolism that you see with Christ on the cross with his hands raised. Here it says this. The pictograph for Hey looks like a man with his arm raised, whereas the classical Hebrew script is constructed of two vavs of the Daleth with an unattached and inverted yod that functions as the foot of the letter. The meaning of the name Hey is look or behold. So we have the hand, behold. So behold the hand. And then we have the last two here. So behold the hand. And then Vav, which is number 6, has the meaning of nail. And then we have another Hey after that. So we have basically in the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, behold the hand, behold the nail. A picture of a man with his arms raised, which is similar to the symbolism of a man on the cross with his hands nailed to the cross at a position of da'ath, meaning a heart that understands knowledge. And so now you have a different understanding of what all this means, and this different versions of the symbols of the cross, even with another person, St. Anthony, receiving a crown, the crown of thorns, and the angels pointing up to the nebula, which is what they're pointing to, because the nebula is what's found in all these cathedrals. So I hope you guys enjoy that, and ending, I just want to say this. So this information is esoteric. It takes a lot of study, a lot of time, and I realize that there are many channels out there that have tons and tons of subscribers that the information does not contain this type of information. There's a lot of people that don't want to see this. It makes them upset to see this. Because when you put all these pieces together and you can see these things confirming themselves over and over and over again, it really makes people upset because they've been taught something different their whole lives. One of the things that the church has done is they have used parable against the people because they've decided to take these things and leave them as something being literal rather than understanding that these things are written in parable and they're symbolic. And until you dig into this stuff, you don't know that. Not everybody's ready for this kind of stuff. But I enjoy sharing it nevertheless with you guys because I'm an analyst. This is what I do. I analyze, and of course I'm interested in truth myself. And the more I discover, the more I'm able to find the relationships to these various symbols. And I enjoy sharing it with you because when I spit it back out, it keeps it in my head easier. In a way, these videos that I make are almost kind of like notes that I'm taking out loud. And I'm just being happy to share it with you as well as I move along this path. So you guys have a good Easter, and I'll talk to you soon.